But back to Child's Play. It's really impressive. Now, you know, any moving doll would be computer generated, but the way it was done with the combination of puppetry and machinery and actor in suits and inserts here and there, it's incredibly effective here.
It's a series of problems that we didn't know how to surmount that we were able to do while we shot, which was amazing. I really, so looking back on it, because so much was just not a necessity. Number one, I knew it could be done because I'd seen Richard Matheson's The Zuni doll, Dan Curtis. If you're interested in film, in the history of this, Dan Curtis has done a trilogy of terror. And I don't know how they got that on TV, but they did, like in 1970.
It was in the early 70s, and it was written by Richard Matheson and 3 different stories, and that one in particular.
With Karen Black.
She played all the lead in all 3 stories.
And what Dan Curtis did, who never spoke in a quiet voice, he always shouted. Whatever I was an actor in Winds of War for him.
Wow.
And you know, when he was directing. That was the last legit job I had until Azure 2.
I don't know about legit.
Well, okay. Well, no, I was in the stand because of you. Yes.
He blew it up real good.
Where was I?
We were talking about the puppetry and the mix of effects that you used.
Well, anyway, Dan Curtis showed me it could be done, and he was working before there was a Steadicam. And so what he had done is he had taken and put like a 16mm camera or a Bolex, and he put it on roller skates and put it on the floor so you had the POV of the doll. And the doll in Trilogy of Terror is what, maybe 8 inches tall? And he had that, and it was scary as hell. So I knew that somebody had done it. They'd done it for about a 15 or 16 minute sequence, but I knew visually that I could make the doll scary, because mine was at 2.5 feet tall. And so that gave me hope. And then it was how to maintain the illusion. And that had all kinds of problems. We cut around it. I used a wonderful small person, Ed
Not Gein, no.
Ed Gale.
Gale.
And I built oversized sets. I sized the sets up so the sets were, at one point, they were 2.5 times bigger. When the doll burns, that was the small person inside the doll, and they had to have a breathing apparatus then for a burn. Now they can do it simpler than that with gel. When the babysitter's sitting there, and we're on her, and the doll runs through the archway behind her, we couldn't get the shot with anything like a doll, and I was absolutely desperate, and I turned around, and the actor's sister was there, and she was like 4 years old, and I put her in the Chucky outfit through the background out of focus, and behind the arch I hid the mother, and the other side of the arch I hid the nurse, and I had a little 4-year-old girl in Chucky's outfit run across the archway.
And that's a huge scare.
And that's how I got the shot. So like that all the way through.
I love how it ramps up. It's Chucky coming to life really starts with the POV shot. And then it's the little girl running out of focus in the background. And it really takes its time to build up to a little person actually running and doing the stuff. But it's extremely effective even now. And you know that they would just do it in CG.
They'll CGI the entire doll this time around. Yeah. Because it's very time intensive. And I forget how many puppeteers there were, but I had to build the setup 4 or 5 feet off the stage because the puppeteers were underneath. They were working on video screens, and the video screens reversed the action, so the knife would be in this hand up on the on the stage, but down on the screen it was like here, and then they flipped the image somehow, and so it was hell trying to get the doll to do that. It was hell lining up any kind of an eye line with the doll. You'd have 4, 5, 6 puppeteers working at the same time. It was a lot of work.
Well, the design of the doll is fantastic.
Kevin Yeager.
Yeah, Kevin Yeager, who, by the way, married Catherine Hicks, the female star.
And they are still married.
And they are still married. And Catherine had actually achieved achieved a certain amount of fame playing Marilyn Monroe on television before this.
Okay.
Is that it?
I remember her being in the Star Trek movie about whales.
Oh, yeah, number 4.
Is that number 4?
That was 4.
Okay, yeah.
So what about the casting process? When you, again, did you hide the fact that it was a genre film at the time?
You know, I mean, what happened was that a lot of people didn't want to play. Well, I shouldn't say this. I was thrilled with everybody I got in the cast, but it seems with all
We're all friends.
We're all friends here. It seems whenever you do a genre film, they all feel that the monster is the real star of the show and not them. So it's harder to get names, and so I was very, very thankful to get actors as good as Catherine, Chris Sarandon, and all the rest. But it's a problem. I had the same problem with Fright Night, except that I was the first-time director then. And Chris Sarandon really supported me because he was a very, very well-established actor then. And I tried to pay him back.
Well, there are several things that impressed me watching this, 2 decades after it came out. But one of them is the stunts are really big and elaborate, and they go on and on. They're really effective, and they still are startling today. They're very powerful and effective. The car chases, the explosions are pretty maxed out.
That's Richard Franklin. Richard Franklin taught me to try to put in 4 or 5 action sequences per movie. And when I wrote that scene where the knight comes up between Chris Sarandon's legs, and he goes, 3 feet in the air with the dolls underneath, stabbing up. When I wrote that, I knew that every guy in the audience would go up 3 or 4 feet. So, and it worked that way. I don't know how they let me do it. I really don't now.
And it kept going, too. That knife keeps coming over and over, like twice as long as you expected. It just drives you crazy.
Yeah. Wonderful, isn't it?
Well, let's talk a little bit about Child's Play before we show. We don't want to do spoilers or anything, and then take a few questions from the audience.
Sure.
But,
Thank you for this, by the way, Nick. And Nick's wonderful, everybody.
Tom and I have been friends for a long time, and it's really fun to see these movies the way they're intended on a screen, on film, running through sprockets. It's a really great way to do it.
Enjoyable and last.
Yeah. Well, I just saw a print of Stagecoach at the DGA the other night, and it looked like shit.
Did it really?
It really was a horrible print. It was the UCLA archive print.
Oh my God.
But Clint Eastwood was there to talk about it afterwards, so it was really great. Anyway, the day of the horror host, probably most people in this audience are not old enough to have actually had the local horror host on television. Roddy McDowell.
You're deprived.
Here in LA, we had Seymour, and we had Jeepers Creepers, and we had, Elvira started it
Elvira
here before she became national. And it was a really sweet thing at the time. And it felt very personal, and that's kind of the basis for Fright Night.
Right, yes, it is. Yeah, it was Fright Night.
Who were your horror hosts?
We had them. They were on the independent channel. They were on Friday night at 11 o'clock. And that was the only place you could find a horror movie or a sci-fi or a genre movie on television when I was a kid. And they always had a host. Stagger Lee was the one I remember, but I can't tell you who he was. I was sort of in mid-state New York as a kid. But it was you had to drive 100 miles to. I remember driving all the way to Pennsylvania to see Vincent Price and I Am Legend. Okay, because I couldn't find it anywhere. They don't realize anymore. I drove like 4 hours to see Duck You Sucker back around 1977 or something.
And when you're a kid, you go through TV Guide marking what movies are coming up and setting the alarm to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to watch it. It was a different day.
Different day.
But talk about how that kind of inspired you to do Fright Night.
Well, Fright Night is Peter Vincent. It's Hammer and it's AIP mixed together, which was the films that I had as a kid growing up that made me fall in love with the genre. And then Psycho in 60 or 61 changed all that. I mean, that was the real psychological shift or filmmaking, or went from being a proscenium arch into a talented filmmaker who knew how to montage, Mr. Hitchcock. But I grew up in the corny, highly saturated, Roger Corman, Vincent Price, and then the Hammer versions. And the Hammers went psychological after Psycho in '60 with the Jimmy Sangster stuff, all the Oliver Reed stuff. But really, what I grew up on was stuff before that, when they were doing all the stuff with
Revenge of Frankenstein.
Yes,
American titles.
yeah.
Well, working with Roddy McDowell, Roddy McDowell I met once, and just terrific guy, and very knowledgeable, and a wonderful still photographer of Hollywood royalty kind of thing. So that experience, was he the first guy you thought of for Peter Vincent?
Actually, I thought of Vincent Price.
Oh, of course.
And it just wasn't possible when I met Vincent at Roddy McDowell's house for dinner. And he was wonderful. Vincent was sweet. Vincent, he was also very fragile when I met him. And that's why. And so Roddy was the next. Yeah. It sounds strange now, but Roddy was certainly one of the 2 or 3 top candidates to be the next Vincent Price. I don't think I ever would have told Roddy that, but Roddy understood, that tradition, and was dear friends with Vincent.
And he had also been amazing in Legend of Hell House.
Amazing, but he was like, 32, 33. But yes, as the career goes along, it slips out of the A's into the B's. But Roddy had done a brilliant job in another film I wrote called Class of '84. And so I thought of him right away when I found out that Vincent Price was not well enough to do it.
He's terrific. Well, let's take some questions before watching the wonderful Fright Night.
Yeah, I thought you used the Chicago setting really effectively with the cold and the urban desolation, and I was just curious, why did you choose Chicago, and how did you work that into your themes and your story, the palette, all the other things we're talking about?
I can't remember now why we shot there. I mean, you needed a big city. And I think we had a choice, and we went up and looked at San Francisco. And I don't remember the tax things working at the time. I don't think that was part of it. I think I chose it because it had the buildings. I also knew it because I had spent my freshman year I spent in Northwestern. So I was familiar with the city. And then we looked, then I went with John DeCure Sr., and we location scouted, and really I was able to make it bigger. I was trying to elevate it, and that's what it did. And that's the answer to the action sequences, too.
Over here.
I just wanted to say, Fright Night, all-time favorite horror movie.
Thank you.
But beyond that, did you ever have any other plans to continue with sequels, and what do you think of the new one that they're doing?
I think it's a wonderful compliment. It's, the good news is they're doing it, the bad news is they're doing it. I wish them the best. I hope it's huge, and I hope it's wonderful, and I just wish all of them the best. I thought it was a great cast, talented director. It's the same story. They modernized it, which I think it's a wonderful compliment. And I pray to God that it's a wonderful, brilliant movie. And I hope they make $1 gazillion and do 10 more.